Great, so welcome everybody to today's Knowledge Bites, which these are timely webinars that we do for opportunities or information that people need to have right now to do things. And this, particularly today, this Bylaw Modernization grant program, it's very timely because applications are due November 1st, and it does require having a signed resolution from your Planning Commission and your select board. So if you are interested in applying for this grant, you will need to think about getting on those schedules right away and just get that happening. So the Bylaw Modernization Grant Program is special funding for updating zoning for needed homes in great neighborhoods. And we have Jacob Hemrick here, who's the planning and policy major for the Vermont Department of Housing and Community Development. So he's going to walk us through what the program is and what it can do for you and what you need to know in order to apply. And then we also have representatives from Wyndham Regional Commission. So I see Sue Westa is here. And it may be that, is Matt going to jump on or just do Sue?
Yeah, I think Matt's going to join us as soon as he can.
Great. So Sue and Matt are working on a project now. And then we also have Kat Byers and Jim Sullivan from Bennington County Regional Commission, and they're working on a group project, sort of a multi-town project in Bennington now. So first we'll hear from Jacob, and then we'll hear from them a little bit about, anything they think that you need to know about the projects that they're working on right now, and what you need to know to apply. So let's just go ahead and do the presentation, and then maybe we can just pop around and introduce ourselves after. We've heard a little more about the program. We'll just start there. So Jacob, if you want to take it away, I will pop into your presentation.
Great, thanks, Meg, and thanks everybody for giving up some of your time today, and all the partners for being here. This was put together on the quick, and I really value the opportunity to provide some information to Southern Vermont, and particularly because Southern Vermont is so outside looking in. I'm impressed by how much collaboration happens both across the regions and with the Brattleboro Development Corporation and the Southern Vermont the SIDS. And so excited to be here. I'm broadcasting live from Montpelier, Vermont, the Dean C. Davis building, and just want to give you an overview of the Bylaw Modernization grants, so you can know if you what it takes to do an application, and answer any questions you have. So next slide. So just a word about me. I'm a community planning and policy manager in the Vermont Department of Housing and Community Development. Just so you know where we are in state government, we're in the Agency of Commerce, and it's a division in the Department of Housing and Community Development. But we focus on, if you can go to the next slide, tools, training, grants, and incentives for local leaders to plan and implement projects that support thriving communities. So, and we do that through a variety of means. I'm not going to talk about all that today, but many of you may be familiar with the designation program. We manage those. We manage the long-term municipal planning grant program, pass-through funding through the for the regional planning commission. So even electric vehicle charging stations we've gotten involved in. So a lot of different programs. Next slide. And some of the ways you can learn about, just keep tabs on what's happening both in our division and in the department, is that we have a newsletter, and we definitely invite you to subscribe to our newsletter. You can find this link on accd.vermont.gov. It's a periodic newsletter. It'll keep you up to date on different programs, what's happening in other communities, announcements. It's just a good resource, helpful resource for community leaders to explore opportunities and look over the fence to see what other communities are working on. Next slide. So I'm going to just dive right into it. This is a program in its second year. I was so thankful for the legislature for renewing this. We thought it was going to be just a one-time program coming off of a zoning guide that the department put together with the Congress for New Urbanism, with the Regional Planning Commission, with a variety of partners, called Enabling Better Places Zoning for Great Neighborhoods. And they renewed it for a second year. Last year, we had 23 projects in 41 municipalities from Wilmington to Newport. There were a handful in southern Vermont, including Brattleboro, and a group application, a multi-town application led by Bennington County. I know you're looking at my slideshow, but you can see there's just really great statewide coverage and uptake on that program. And we hope to get a strong response for this next round. Next slide. So you'll see that we have up to $650,000 to award to municipalities across the state. This just is a word for people who manage federal grants versus state grants. This is state funding, so it's a little bit easier to administer than federal funding, fewer boxes to check along the way. Next slide. And it's designed to help municipalities hire consultants and bylaw writing experts to prepare place-based and housing-specific amendments for zoning, subdivision, and unified development ordinances. So it's something you can tackle any of those ordinance amendments with this funding. Next slide. This year, we have a simplified PDF application. So if you are familiar preparing applications with Department of Housing and Community Development, we typically run them through a software program called the GEAR software. It can be a little cumbersome and clunky because this was what we thought was going to be one-time funding, now two-time funding. We tried to make that really easy for applicants to sign on. And so we're doing the PDF application again this year. A key deadline you want to keep in mind is that applications are due November 1st, 2022 by 6 p.m. And it's just an email to one of the staff members here in the Department of Housing and Community Development. Next slide. So municipalities with RPC confirmed plans can apply individually or as a multi-town group. There's different pathways you can do it, but we've seen in several regions across the state where municipalities that are tackling a shared issue or want to collaborate can get a good project together by partnering with the Regional Planning Commission and other towns in the region who are working on similar bylaw changes. Next slide. So if you're a single municipality, individual municipality, you can apply for a grant up to, I'm sorry, that should say, that's a typo. This should say 25,000. And multi-town groups can apply for a grant up to 60,000. What that could be our total, that could be a total. You could get a total project cost up to that, but those numbers are inaccurate. I'll have to send you an updated slide, Meg, but it's 25 and 60,000. Unless I had somehow lost. Now I'm double checking myself. Yeah, that's correct. It's 25 and 60. We do require a 10% local cash match, and that's a forgivable match. So if you adopt your amendments prior to closeout as a municipality, so it's an incentive to get the project across the finish line, and then you can get a larger total grant. But if you don't adopt prior to the closeout, then you do need to show, you would have to demonstrate how you've spent your 10% local cash match on the project. And so there's 24 months to complete the project, and we're going to have awards announced in December or January. And I see a question from Gary: is the match part of the 25,000? No, that's on top of the 25,000. So. And so we plan to get these grants announced in December or January. It's the commissioner will authorize the grants based on the scores. And just so you know, there are some benchmarks in the next slide that the applications have to meet our eligibility requirements. And that's because the legislature in the Natural Resources Committee spent a lot of time refining how they want this money to be targeted in particular ways. And I'll go into those details in my slideshow here today. Next slide. So finally, the applications are going to be scored by the Department of Housing and Community Development. We send our scores over to the commissioner. The commissioner then makes the decision on the projects that'll move forward. And we'll, even though we're looking at scores, we're also looking at regional balance. So we want to make sure that we have good statewide coverage. We're providing equity for small towns as well as large towns. So there is an equity component to that. Next slide. So eligible projects, what can you do? Again, this is intended to help municipalities confront the state's housing shortage and ready area for housing development. So that's the primary focus of this program. Next slide. And it's a place-based focus, and that project should support a pedestrian-oriented development pattern and increase housing choice, affordability, and opportunities in areas planned in accordance with Vermont's smart growth principles. So those tend to be areas in and around our historic settlements like villages and downtowns or the surrounding neighborhoods. Next slide. And you'll see in the application, there's an eligibility checklist and as well as in the program description that provides more details on the topics of reform that the legislature has asked DHCD and the municipalities to work on. Those include looking at your dimensional standards like setbacks or heights, lot coverages, your uses, what type of residential uses are allowed in which districts, expanding them where appropriate. Evaluating nonconformities, how many buildings or lots conform to the standards in the bylaw right now, and how can you reduce those nonconformities? So the existing pattern that people like is a legal pattern: streets, parking, fair housing, knowing where your sewer lines are, which is so important. And it's okay if you don't have sewer. We'll talk about that a little bit today, but just kind of knowing where you are with your water sewer enterprise is really helpful for land use planning. Next slide. And if you need a plan update, the program will allow you to update the municipal plan's housing element only if needed and as provided for in the Planning Act. And that's should focus on addressing lower and moderate income housing needs and implementing the plan through bylaw amendments. So that's kind of would be a tactical amendment where you would combine a plan amendment with a bylaw amendment, and only if needed. Really, we want you to focus on bylaw amendments as the primary purpose of this grant funding. So that takes us to the next slide of funding amounts and match. So I said you can do an individual application, and here I have my numbers right. I just didn't get those numbers right on that front slide. But an individual application for a maximum of $25,000, or you can apply with other municipalities as part of a multi-town application. And the maximum amount for a multi-town application varies based on the number of participating municipalities. So you can see here in this table that if you have 5 municipalities participating, you can apply for a maximum grant up to $50,000. And there would need to be a lead municipality, but you'll see that the RPC can have a special role. I'll talk about that within this grant program. Again, all applications, whether they're individual or multi-town, will need that 10% grant match. So in terms of our special role an RPC can play, they can serve as an agent for an application. So your regional planning commission is the Wyndham Regional Commission and the Bennington County Regional Commission in the south. And they can support rural towns with populations of less than 2,500. And that's kind of a threshold that's been established in the Planning Act for a variety of governance mechanisms. But they can also serve as an agent for a multi-town group. And that means they can help you prepare the application, they can support the grant administration, and they will be exempt from the normal competitive procurement, a best practice procurement, if they're serving as the project consultant. RPC could also subcontract too. So it's a great way to leverage the expertise and project management skills of your regional planning commission, and get a good economy of scale and start working across town lines as much as you can. Next slide. So in terms of the use of the funds, you can use it to underwrite public meetings. You can make accommodations and incentives for underrepresented or lower resourced or people impacted by the project. So that can include offering childcare or transportation reimbursements. You can do some data collection. Oftentimes you just need a baseline. I discourage anybody from going into analysis paralysis, but because there's already so much data out there. But sometimes you might get stuck and you need to do a little bit of data work. Of course, you can pay consultants and purchase materials, so it's pretty flexible funding. And what you're going to see on the next slide is how we evaluate these applications. So you're going to see we look at community need, and that's really you talking about how you're meeting the eligibility requirements and some of your housing goals and why this project is urgent. What are the urgent housing needs that you're trying to confront? Project approach and budget is really about making sure that things make sense, making sure that it's reasonable for the scope of work. And we have priority locations and public outreach. I'll loop back to priority locations, but public outreach we think is really important because bylaw amendments can have very tough hearing processes, and we want to build buy-in and consensus as you work through some of these issues along the way. So that's where if you're doing a small scope amendment, you can really focus on having those community meetings, doing those walking tours, putting out a survey, doing that type of work that understands where your community is, where there are points of agreement, how you can thread the needle to get to yes for more housing within your community. On the next slide, you're going to see that the program does preference certain locations. Now that shouldn't discourage you from applying, because I think there's quite a bit of money, and we, as a second round grant program, we think this might be a little less competitive this year than say the municipal planning grant program, which is a 30-year program. But we are going to try to target funding as much as we can to high demand housing markets, projects that relate to state designated areas, so the downtowns, villages, neighborhood development areas, anywhere where you're looking at infill ready neighborhoods, places that have water, sewer that could support housing right now, and projects likely to result in near-term housing development. So let's say you're partnering with a private or affordable housing or nonprofit housing developer, and you see how a few changes could make that project a lot better, help meet your community needs better. That signals to us that it's a ready project. Also, anywhere that's thinking about a neighborhood development area designation, which provides place-based incentives for more affordable homes, that'll bump you up in competitiveness. And that's really it. So those are the priority areas. Now, let's say you're in a village, you don't have sewer, you don't have water, that's okay. We recognize that those areas can also benefit from zoning amendments, and there's always going to be a state water wastewater permit, or under statute now, you would require a state water wastewater permit to develop in a village, and that's where not letting zoning get in the way of infill housing development in the village. This can be helpful for that too. In terms of the timeline, I mentioned it before, I'll mention it again. It's November 1st at 6 p.m. We'll make award announcements in December and January. And again, you have 24 months to complete a project. And all the information that I talked about today is available on the program webpage and guide, and here's just a screenshot of it so you can see where you can get the program details, the application form, and also a municipal resolution form. So as we near November 1st, take that into account to get that before your planning commissions and select boards, get that on their schedules. And I'll note that if you're doing a multi-town application and you can't get that resolution through all the participating bodies, that's okay. Get it through the lead municipality, and then we can follow up and get the resolution for other municipalities that might be joining in as a team effort. And so next slide, you can see again the application form is very simple, PDF, fillable application, straightforward. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call me. You can contact or email Jenny Lavoie. You can see her contact information at the top of the application form. That's where you would email this application to. And with that, I will take any questions you have. I'm again just really appreciative that you're interested in this topic. And I think it's timely. There's a lot of press around zoning right now. We've been getting a lot of calls from reporters about this program, from Howard Weiss Tissman to 7 Days. We expect that there's going to be a 7 Days article pretty soon. So a lot of people are thinking about how can we update our zoning, modernize our zoning to welcome more homes and new neighbors in the right locations. So I certainly hope you'll consider it in your town.
So I'll just open it up briefly to questions, and then we can have our regional planning commissions just talk a little bit about their projects. So you can get a sense of what's out there. Does anyone have any questions right now? And we can also have more room for questions at the end. Just feel free to unmute yourself and ask away because we're a pretty small group.
I have a question, Jake.
Hi, so
Hi. One of the communities that we're working with has a designated village center, but no infrastructure, no sewer or water infrastructure. And it sounds like they could be eligible for this program from what you've said today. And they were wondering, however, if it would have been better for them to apply for a municipal planning grant because they didn't have the infrastructure. I don't know which they'd be more competitive for.
I expect that they would be, there's more likely to be funded with a bylaw modernization grant. And the reason for that is that there was just a legislative drafting error that became law that reduced the amount of municipal planning grant funds this year.
Okay.
And so there's more funding available here than in the municipal planning grant pool. And we, I'm hoping that, let me be careful how I say this. There is discussion that there may be a budget adjustment bill that restores some of the municipal planning grant funding, but at this time, it's unclear. If that'll happen. Of course, that has to go through the legislative process, but really the clearer path for funding based on what we know right now is the bylaw modernization grant. And even in villages that are unsewered, that's totally okay. There's still opportunities to support infill, whether it's on-site, even if you're planning for on-site septic and water, or some type of community or shared system within the development.
Mm-hmm. And one other thing you mentioned was that a priority is going to be high demand housing markets. How do you determine what is a high demand market?
Well, what we would do is encourage you to look at your housing profile on the Vermont Housing Finance Agency website. They have the community housing profile, and so in those areas we would be looking for justification that there's limited affordability or cost burden households. Other signals like that where there might be a lot of jobs, but a few homes. That tends to be a pretty high demand housing market. So,
okay, thank you.
No, I have that window open somewhere on my screen, so give me a moment. I'll find it. I'm pasting links in the chat for all the applications and so on, although they're not hard to find, so I can look for that. There's a great amount of information available through VHFA, so check it out. Great. Well, does anyone else have questions right now, or should we just turn it over and I see Matt is on too, maybe let Matt and Sue, they can talk a little bit about the single town project that they're working on this year. It's really good to take a look at. I posted in the chat at the top of the chat that programs that were funded last year. So I always find when you're writing your grant application, like those have little concise summaries. And so if that just helps you to see what other communities have done, how they've represented their project, it's really helpful. And of course, the regional planning commissions can be really helpful too. If you've done any work on housing in your community, you probably have some of that, but it's just boiling it down to the nugget that's going to fit in the PDF. So Sue and Matt, why don't you guys take it away and just quickly talk about the project that you're working on in Wilmington right now as a single town project.
Yeah, and I'll get started, and then Matt can chime in if he has anything else to add. But last year we worked with the town of Wilmington to develop a bylaw modernization grant application. We acted as the agent, and they had developed some draft text for the grant application that that we used as a starting place and edited and then developed the budget and the timeline really to fill out that application. One thing that Wilmington had done previously was work with their neighbors in Dover to develop a housing needs assessment, which was really a great basis for the work that we're currently doing. So since that time, the town established a steering committee is made up of local planning commission folks, economic development folks, landlord, a realtor, and other local stakeholders. We've been holding regular meetings with the steering committee to get feedback from them about what will work and what's appropriate for Wilmington. We are in the process of planning a public meeting for October. And prior to that meeting, we're going to hold a walk around of the village to look at some of the existing housing to help folks better understand what multifamily housing is already in place, because this is one of the focuses of this application. And so the town is looking at changing dimensional requirements, density requirements, allowable uses, and reducing parking requirements, just to name a few of those things that are underway. And once we receive the feedback from the public, we'll work with the steering committee again to make some final recommendations that will then be passed on to the planning commission and eventually the select board for their approval. And hopefully that will all happen by the end of the grant period so that they're eligible to receive the full amount of their grant. We've been working, as Meg knows, closely with her. She was the planning commission chair. And so Meg, if you have anything to add to that too, please feel free.
I'll just stress what I said again. You have to get, a sign off resolution from your planning commission and from your select board. So as someone who gets on a lot of select board agendas, you just have to reach out and get on that agenda and get it done. So just do that first. First, get on the agenda, then write your grant application. That's all I'm going to say. I will also say from that experience, you don't feel like you have to 100% have to have it all mapped out ahead of time, because you do have 2 years. So we did not even have a committee put together. When we got, I think we put our committee together in March or something. Like, we found out we got the funding and we were like, great, okay. Then we kind of made a more concrete plan, and then we made a committee and then started the work, and then I stepped away. So handed it off to the really a good, interesting committee. Gary has a question. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, so in that scenario, Meg, how did you know what to spend your money on and put a budget together? Right, because you have just that comes up way, like we have a planning commission that looks at the density issues and things that they want to do to encourage housing. And so how can we use these funds to help us get to the end game? Like, what do we spend the money on? So
we asked the brilliant Susan Westa, who helped us make a budget. Basically, that's what we did. We said, we need help with the budget part. So basically for the budget, it's like, how long do you think it's going to take for a consultant? So whether that's Wyndham Regional Commission or a consultant to go through your existing zoning and see what you've got, and then maybe make a presentation. So we spun off a separate committee from the Planning Commission in case the Planning Commission had other stuff they wanted to be working on during that time. So right now it's the steering committee kind of doing that work, and then they're going to bring it all back to the Planning Commission, who's then going to, work with the bylaw changes. So basically what you need to do is you're just going to estimate like how long you think it's going to take for someone to kind of do that research and do that work for you. And so that is where our regional commissions are really super useful, because they do municipal planning grants for people. They do this type of work, and they would be the best person to ask. So guys, your phones might ring, but like, that's just ask them, because they could really tell you. Yeah, it's no, they know, because they do these things. So that's what I would say is, and again, I don't know, like I always think that a budget is a guide, and it's a guide that's informed by knowledge, but it is not an inviolable document. So if you end up spending more money in one place than another, as long as you're coming to your total at the end, that's okay. But just, you're going to come up with a number that makes sense for how long is it going to take someone to chew through the data and spit out, an answer kind of, or a suggestion or something that then your committee can see. So you can come up with an estimate, I think.
And some of the other costs, Gary, that we included in that budget were mailing. We're mailing a postcard to all town residents right now about the public meeting. Also other things related to the public meeting, like childcare, which we're providing as part of, and those are things that are covered under this grant.
Great. And it's like an attorney is the type of person that would read through the bylaws and see how to change them to meet the goals that the planning commission set?
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
I think we included there were legal fees included for the end, because it's like the attorney doesn't get that till the end, but you always want to have your final bylaw reviewed by legal before it goes to a hearing. So you can include the reasonable attorney fees that your town would expect to incur for that review. And you can ask your town about that. It's based on what your estimate is. And I will say the 10% match is a minimum. So you certainly can plan to spend more. So you could put in a 20% match and say, well, we anticipate that half of that will get refunded. So say you take the 25,000, you say, okay, we'll add in, 2,500, but then we'll add in another 2,500. You can spend more. So, but just, when you're building your budget. So yeah, so that's an example of a single town plan. I would love it now in Bennington County. Kat Byers is working on a multi-town plan, which is interesting and different. So just to put that out there to talk about how that came about and what it's entailing and how that's going. Take it away.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Kat Byers. I'm Director of Planning over at Bennington County Regional Commission. And yes, as Meg said, we took, this other option for how to use these funds and try to stretch them so that they touch as many communities as possible, is to do, what in the language of MPG world is a consortium application. So getting a number of towns together. In our case in Bennington, we actually pulled 9 municipalities together to put in an application with one leading town and to cover funding. That I believe the total grant to cover 9 municipalities was for $54,000. And so, now we're getting kind of with that was funded for us, this past year. So with the 2-year marker, we're getting a little close to the halfway point with that, and we're on good track to work through all of those 9 municipalities. And, there were some questions about, this is obviously funding that's needs to be applied for pretty quickly for towns that want to act this year. And what do you do if you're a town that you don't know yet what exactly you need to do and how to plan for it? And I loved Meg's point, which is that if you don't exactly know, it's nice that this is a 2-year period where you could include tasks in your proposal that help you figure out what you need to do. BCRC, knowing that this housing bylaw funding was kind of coming down the pike back in 2019, BCRC started to strategize how do we, again, have this nice state resource touch as many of our communities as possible. And so I wanted to share, I'll drop them in the chat, 3 different resources that we generated or relied on a lot. And I'll get points from Jacob for sharing DHCD's Enabling Better Places guide. And really that's the philosophy that BCRC totally took and ran with for our region, which can be summarized as incremental change. So not fundamentally rewriting and needing a brand new bylaw. There are some towns that maybe do need a bylaw rewrite. But a lot of towns, you know, your zoning is working okay for you, but you may have unintended barriers to housing that aren't even really what towns want anymore, but they're codified in the bylaw and they can present some real barriers. So just a really quick rundown of the top items there include high parking minimum requirements for housing units, not allowing mixed use by right. If you're allowing individual uses by right, but then as soon as they become a mixed use, you have a conditional use review. Is there a reason for that, or can you just make it by right? Allowing small multifamily in more areas. So, you know, a lot of communities say single family, 2-family housing, yes, but then as soon as we say 3 or more units, no, that's got to go to, it's either not allowed or it's conditional use review. Can we start to think in a more complex way about, well, there's small forms of multifamily housing. There are 3-unit housing and 4-unit housing that maybe that's okay. And the impact of that is not that different from a 2-family home that we're allowing in this area. So, you know, can we allow that? And again, with the idea being that it's incremental, nobody's talking about throwing out your bylaw and starting over. There's really these targeted changes that you can go in and do. And so, so if you want to look at that Enabling Better Places guide from DHCD, that has a really nice kind of checklist of those types of items. And then what BCRC did with it, I'll share as a resource with you guys. We got an MPG in 2020 to go through all of our municipalities that we serve, which are 17 municipalities, and basically apply that checklist in addition to doing a housing profile by the community, discussing current zoning, and then by community, what are potential regulatory changes to work through that checklist. So that gave us a final product of exactly what are the best steps to implement this incremental approach in all of our towns. From there, when the Bylaw Modernization grant came around, we were able to identify our 9 top priority towns that wanted to work on this, and we put in our BMG application, and we're running with it. So that's like the kind of analysis that maybe you could include in a BMG application to hey, let's use the Better Places guide and apply it, come up with a checklist, and then implement the checklist. And if that's not ready, you can still pay your regional planning commission or another consultant to do that as part of this work. And then I'll share one more link, I promise, one more. This is another project that we did in the meantime that has supported our work. And I believe Jake was referencing this earlier, which is a non-conformance analysis. And we did this not throughout our whole region, but we worked with a UVM intern to do this in some designated village centers. You guys can read about it. This is a nice GIS story map that the intern generated, but you can look at, you know, if there were a major flood in your beloved historic village tomorrow and everything were wiped clean, could you rebuild that beloved village center as is? And what you find are astounding levels of non-conformance that you could not rebuild your beloved village center because your bylaw does not allow it. So even though a lot of our policy documents say that we want to reinforce historic development patterns, our bylaws in many cases are not allowing that. And so, you know, take a look if you want to see an example of what that looks like for what we did at BCRC. But in short, you know, the non-conformance rates are sometimes upwards, often upwards of like 80% of non-compliance with the zoning, which again provides a really nice roadmap to go in and say, well, really it's our rear setbacks. Basically, you know, 90% of our lots are not meeting our rear setback requirement. That seems like a pretty easy thing to update. And again, it's very focused. It's going in and really focusing in on the issue and not getting overwhelmed by, well, we need a whole new bylaw. Sometimes you don't. So yeah, I know we don't have a lot of time. So that's my kind of quick and dirty version of how we're doing things over on this side of the mountain.
Great. I think that's really helpful just to see. I like that there's 2 like really different sort of plans going on. So you can see there's a lot of possibility. And again, I did drop, if you go back through the chat, I put the housingdata.org has so much information on it. So just know that is a wealth of information that you can mine about, like if you need some data about your community and, you know, the possible housing needs. So don't even feel like, if you're like, didn't do housing needs analysis yet, you can access a lot of information there. I mean, it's not a bad idea to do a housing needs assessment, but like don't let it stop you from moving forward, because the most important thing is to just keep taking every step that you can take. And so this is one of them. Zoning bylaw updates are not going to like invite developers to come into your community, but like at least you're setting the stage where it's possible. And so it's sort of like do everything all at once, but this is one step you can do, and you can access a lot of that data on the housingdata.org. So it's a great site. Any other questions before we go? And I'm just going to say, I'll go back a slide here. This is all the contact for your regional commission people. Jim Sullivan, you don't have long to contact him, but he's has worked on a lot of these projects, and so he can certainly, before he's up the door, can answer some questions and is more than willing to. And then Sue and Matt are in process, and then just go back. You can call Jacob. Everybody's contact information is here. We'll say that this is going to be recorded, so we'll get it up on the BDCC blog and get everybody. You'll be able to. I'll send everybody who is here today. You can link to the recording and the slides, but just I think there's a lot of. If you just really read through the program description, I think you'll be and just call those people. You'll be in good hands. So I'm gonna stop the share. Any further questions before we? I said we go to 12:45, so we have managed that. If anybody has questions, that's great. Feeling like I'm in a planning, like a select board meeting right now. Hearing none. If I don't,
I'm kind of wondering where Jim's going to take his first vacation after retirement.
I know nobody will see my my Zoom backgrounds from my vacations anymore. So yeah, but going to the Virgin Islands for my first vacation, Jake. So
Yeah, and I hear John Bennett's last day is the 30th. So shout out to John too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I hope everyone has gotten some questions answered here and gotten inspired to do an application. I think that it's really good to hear about, that just different, because some people were thinking about, should we do a municipal planning grant? And it sounds like if you're really thinking about housing, this is a good way to go. Take advantage of this being available. And we had several towns have kind of done projects already. So they've been taken out of the running for applying this year. So if you're interested, I say go for it. If you have any questions, feel free again to ask any of those people. And as Sue said, I did help prepare an application last year for Wilmington, so I'm happy to answer questions as well. But I really thank Jake for being here and for making this application process pretty easy. It's really a gift to have that be easier to manage than some other funding for towns. I know we all struggle with capacity.
Don't tell ADS, Meg, that we're.
No. It's been great though. It's really been. It's a nice opportunity. Let's just put it that way. So take advantage of this program, and I really hope that we'll see some applications coming through. And I'm just going to put a quick plug in. That we are planning on December 1st down here, like a get your hands dirty type of workshop for towns that's going to be called Local Solutions for Local Housing Needs. So I know there's a lot of statewide resources, but we want to like drill down on like what are some things while you're putting together the big picture, which you're going to be doing because you need to be putting together the big picture. Are there some small steps you can be taking in the meantime because we all have housing crises that are happening now. So what are some small steps you can do in the meantime while you're also taking care of those big steps? So we're not going to look at the big steps, and then we're going to have some hands-on workshops, and we may even do it in Wilmington. I think we are going to do it in Wilmington. So we can even do like the mini, just because Wilmington has such a compact downtown, we can take like redo the mini housing walk in Wilmington, except it'll be freezing because it'll be December, but that's okay. Sure, it'll take 15 minutes. You can circle the entire village and see amazing housing densities. So thank you everybody for joining. Please reach out with any questions and we'll get this recording out to you. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Meg.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.